Like I said, this is a time unlike any other time. There's a lot going on. I don't know how many listened to EMIC last weekend, but Pastor George even was talking about how there's a lot going on. You know, Brother Copeland was attacked in his health. He had his appendicitis, and so he had to have his appendix removed. Now, he was preaching to them even when he was under anesthesia and praying in tongues and and joking around and everything. So he showed the enemy who was boss. But it goes to show you that across the board, no matter who you are, no matter if you're doing anything for the kingdom of God, there's going to be attacks. The enemy is going to attack. This is war. What do you expect? You know, if you decide, What do you expect the end days to look like? You know, how foolish would it be for someone, and which actually does occur now that I'm thinking of it, but for a young person to sign up to go into the army, and they get sent overseas to a battlefield, and then they're hiding behind a rock saying, I didn't think that they were going to be shooting at me. Well, you signed up for the army. What did you think this was going to be, a walk in the park? I'm going to go and tour around all these nations and get to have an overseas tour? No, this is not fun and games. This is real. This is war. It's not playground anymore. And you can't go by flesh and blood. You can't walk through these days in your flesh, because otherwise you're going to be a casualty on the landscape. And I think we kind of wanted to pick up with where we left off last week, talking about running our race and the importance of being able to finish our race. You know, we talked last week about how it's not how you start, but it's how you finish that matters. You could start all gun-ho and be going along really good, but if something happens to either knock you out of the race or you slow down, then you're not going to win your race. You're not going to come to the end and say, I finished my race, I finished my course. And we all want to do that. We don't want to be disqualified. So we're going to get into more of that today.
So we're going to starting with the right way to live and ending with the right way to die. Okay, there's a right way to live and there's a right way to die. And just like what Jordan was saying about Pastor George last week, you know, interesting how much he was talking about strength. You know, and you look at David, and what did David do? He didn't go running to, you know, so-and-so. He strengthened himself in the Lord. He strengthened himself. So there are going to be times where you might not have, your mom might not be available. You might be on your own somewhere. And you've got to know how to strengthen yourself in the Lord. You've got to know what resides inside of you. You've got to know the right way to live. We need to realize that our position in Yeshua, and this is one of the things that, you know, is the right way to live and the right way to die, that our position in Yeshua, you know, and this is a biggie. We just came out of Pesach and you know, our resurrected King. Well, our resurrected King, like that song that we sing, oh, that rhymed. Our resurrected King, like that song that we sing, okay, he's resurrected us. Well, how? Because of our position in him, resurrection power is available to us.
You know, with Israel, Netanyahu made a statement this week that if need be, if we have to stand alone, we'll stand alone. Like, there's no option of, fine, because the world is saying it, I'm just going to back off and not finish off Hamas. There's no option of, well, because everybody's against us, I'm going to back off and not do something that contradicts the enemy, that takes out the enemy's camp. If we have to stand alone, we'll stand alone. But we're never truly alone, because Yahweh is on their side. And if Yahweh is on their side, who can be against them? The same thing goes for us. If we have to stand alone, we'll stand alone. But we're never truly alone. He's with us. He said he would never leave us, never forsake us. He'll always be with us.
So interested in the midst of all this, and I was going to start with this. I get this letter, it's a partner letter that I received in the mail. And, you know, it's just the timing, the way Yahweh does things. You know, it's just for the perfect timing of stuff. So this letter starts out, and we just became partners with her very recently. But it says, take this letter to heart and step into an overflow of prosperity, peace, and purpose. Well, I want to add, how do you do that? You've got to know who you are, and you've got to know the resurrection power that resides in you. That's the only way to live. It's the only way to live. So she starts out writing, while praying about what to write to you this month, the Lord prompted me to share a serious and practical message with you. I promise I'm still going to cheer you on and encourage you, but I also want you to just pause for a moment and consider your life. Okay? We need to do that every once in a while. We just need to pause for a moment and consider our lives. James 4:14 tells us that our life is like a vapor. It appears for a short time and then vanishes. The Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 6:1, we beg you, please don't squander one bit of this marvelous life Yahweh has given us. Here's a big question for you. What are you going to do with the life that you have left? And as I'm reading this, remember, we accomplish all this. We do everything that Yahweh has called us to do successfully because of resurrection power. It is such a big thing, and we tend to only focus on it during Pesach and stuff. It has got to be our focus every day of the year, 24/7, 365 days a week, because that's what resides in us. And it's the resurrection power that obliterates anything from the enemy. It's resurrection power that demolishes anything that the enemy is trying to do to us. It says, I remember the day I received a text from my mom letting me know that a close family friend and mentor had passed away. He had been enjoying time all weekend with his family, riding jet skis and grilling out. The next day he was gone. It was a complete shock. Going to his funeral was a wake-up call for me. I left there thinking, what do I need to do before my time is up? What is Yahweh expecting me to accomplish? Then I took it even further and asked myself, would I be ready in every area? After your time on earth, when those closest to you go through your belongings, your closets, your dresser drawers, your pantry, your computer, your files, your finances, your last text messages, your social media posts, what will they find? Will they leave a mess? Will you leave a mess or be a blessing? Around the time I was asking myself these questions, the Lord spoke to my heart and said, order brings overflow. This is what I really want you to understand. The overflow of opportunities, promotions, prosperity, shalom, and fulfillment you want will be the result of getting things in order. I understand that there are some things that may be out of your control, but for those things you have the ability to put in order, now is the time to do so. I just want to add my own thing. For those things that seem to be out of our control, we're responsible to get them back into control. We're responsible to how that end result comes out. 1 Corinthians 14:33 and 14:40 tells us that Yahweh is not a Yahweh of disorder, but of shalom, and that we are able to make sure everything we're involved with is done properly and in order. The opposite of order is chaos, confusion, disarray, discombobulation, or embarrassment. Yahweh doesn't bless chaos and confusion, much less discombobulation. Now, I want to get very practical in a way most ministers don't talk about, but what I'm going to share came straight from my time with the Lord. Here's what he said about getting your life in order. Get yourself in order. That's a biggie. We have to have ourselves in order to know who we are, and in order to operate in resurrection power. It says, have you ever noticed when someone's phone gets to 7% left on the battery, they start doing everything they can to find a charger and an outlet. The warning sign is flashing and they must get it charged back up. Why don't we put that same kind of priority on our health and personal growth as we do our phones? She goes on to say things about, scheduled health checkups and stuff like that if you've been putting it off. Get the rest your mind and body needs. Pushing yourself and not getting enough rest affects your mood, metabolism, and energy. These are all important things, okay? You got to get yourself in order. Because if you're not, like what she just said, if you're pushing yourself and not getting enough rest, it not only affects you, it impacts all those around you, okay? And we know that. Some of us know that by experience. It impacts those around you. It's not like you're intentionally meaning to sometimes, some people, they don't get enough sleep, they get crabby, although that's not kosher, grouchy, short. and unpleasant, and they snap at you, and it's not you. They don't mean to snap at you. It's just because of everything that's been going on, but they haven't kept themselves in order to allow themselves not to act out that way. So you got to get yourself in order.
And some people think that they can get away with not getting enough rest by just caffeinating. I'm just going to drink 20 cups of coffee a day, and then but that adds a whole other set of problems. That adds a whole other set of health challenges, emotional challenges. That's not the answer. The answer is get sleep.
The second one is get your surroundings in order. Your home is a representation of your life. Develop the habit of finishing what you start and taking care of what you have now. Establish a new standard of excellence in your life. When Yahweh sees you being a faithful steward over what you have now, he will bless you with even greater. Now, this is kind of a side note, but people will say, well, what is my house? The physical houses that we have to live in. What does that have to do with anything? It has a lot to do with everything. It reflects on you. It reflects on, well, if this is how you have your house and your car, I think in your car, okay, I think a while back we talked about like decluttering your mind and stuff like that. But interesting, I just recently was reading something from a pastor, and they were talking about this whole thing. And you have people that have their houses cluttered and not in order, and you can barely get a vacuum cleaner through it, never mind walk through it, okay? But they were saying, in all seriousness, in the natural, a cluttered house, a house that has a lot of stuff all over the place and whatever, there's a 60% increase of people, and this is natural, 60% increase of people having depression and anxiety. Well, think about it. You're in that all the time. You're in that day in and day out. It's going to affect you. It's chaos. It's chaos in your life. Then transfer that over to your car. Okay, so you have your house like that, your car like that. And I'll go one step further to say, an office like that. But I'll go one step further to say, that's not excellence. Okay, that's not excellence. And we're supposed to be a people of excellence. How would you feel if Yeshua showed up at your front door unexpectedly? And would you be comfortable? I could say, how would you feel if Mom showed up at your front door?
I was just going to say that.
Would you feel comfortable letting her in? Hey, all seriousness, okay? Would you feel comfortable letting her in? If Yeshua needed a ride somewhere, would you have to clear out your passenger seat just to give them this little spot to sit in so you could bring them somewhere? This is actually really serious. I saw her thing, I was listening to something, and Rick Renner, okay, we all know who Rick Renner is, before he even considers putting somebody in a leadership position, he surprises them by showing up at their house. And if he knocks on the door, and the person opens the door and they're uncomfortable and they're like, and they don't want to let him in because of how their house is, that speaks volumes to him.
That's biblical.
It is biblical.
It says in the New Testament, Paul said that if a bishop or overseer doesn't have control over his own house and his own family, then how can he have oversight over the house of God? How can he be trusted to keep everything in order here if he can't even keep it in order? It's that whole principle of what you are entrusted with. Are you taking care of what you're entrusted with now so that Yahweh can promote you?
And that's exactly what Rick Renner was saying, because he was like, I'm not going to put this individual in a leadership position because of the quality of their house and the quality of their car, because that's how they're going to treat the ministry. That's how they're going to treat the church and whatever. So, that was just a little rabbit trail, but that's how serious it is. We've got to get things in order. And you can't expect, if you don't have your life in order, your house in order, your car in order, your children in order, as she goes on to talk here about getting your finances in order, stuff like that, you're not operating in who you are supposed to be operating as. You can't operate fully in resurrection power if you can't even get your house the way it's supposed to be. You can't even get your car the way it's supposed to be. And these are things that we need to be operating in because, like I said, it doesn't just impact us, it impacts those around us.
And if we've been talking about vision over the past few weeks too, that you got to have a vision for your life. You need to have things that you're believing for, whether it be your marriage, whether it be I'm believing for a new car, whether it be I'm believing for a house. But as you put those things on your vision board, so to speak, as you put your faith on them, you've got to start where you're at. I think it was Brother Keith Moore that was talking about people who are believing for a new car because they have some old clunker of a car, but if they're not washing that car and keeping that car, keep it as clean as you can. I don't care if it has parts falling off of it as you drive down the street. Keep it as clean as you can, because then Yahweh can entrust you with something new. There was a pastor who was talking about a guy who said, yeah, we're believing for a new Cadillac. And he had, I don't know, some broken down old car. It was Jerry Savelle. Yeah, it was Jerry Savelle. He said, so I went out and looked at his car, and it was all covered in dirt, and inside was all trash. And he said, you're never going to get that Cadillac that you're believing for because you're not taking care of what you have. And the man never did. And he never got what he was believing for. Because he wasn't taking care of what he had now. So whatever you're believing Yahweh for, act now like you have it. Right. If you're believing to be married, act now like you should when you're married. If you're believing for a house and you're in a tiny apartment, act now like you have that house. If you're believing for a new car, act like this car, treat this car like you should a new car. Whatever you're believing Yahweh for, act it out. That's what faith is all about. Faith takes action. It's not just about sitting there and waiting for God to pour the blessing upon you. It's about what steps can I take now to see the fulfillment of this in my life? What do I need to change?
So she also talks about, like I said, get your finances in order, get your future in order, get your goals in order. But she ends saying, as you take action and get your life in order, the ripple effects will be huge. Remember this, order brings overflow. When you start getting yourself, your home, your money, your future, and your goals in order, you will begin to overflow with opportunities, promotion, prosperity, shalom, and fulfillment. And the thing is, it's not just for us. It's not just for us. It's for people that we're going to come into contact with. It's to be a blessing to people. Blessed to be a blessing. We can't operate in resurrection power to somebody else if we're not doing what we need to be doing in our own lives. So, with that being said, like I said, we need to know our position in Yeshua, and it's our responsibility to access it. It says in Ephesians 1:18 through 20, we'll look at it actually in the Amplified Bible. Amplified Classic, Ephesians chapter 1. Actually, I'm just going to start with verse 17. Just going to read down to the end of it. So it says in verse 17, "For I always pray to the God of our Lord, Yeshua the Messiah, the Father of glory, that he may grant us a spirit of wisdom and revelation, of insight into mysteries and secrets and the deep and intimate knowledge of him, by having the eyes of your heart." Just a little side note, because Dad used to talk about this, but all those words where you say you, your, I cross them out and I put me and all that. By having the eyes of your heart flooded with light, so that you can know and understand the hope to which he has called you, and how rich is his glorious inheritance in the saints, and so that you can know and understand what is the immeasurable and unlimited and surpassing greatness of his power in and for us, who believe, as demonstrated in the working of his mighty strength. Now, did you catch that? His power that is in us, for us. Verse 20, which he exerted in Yeshua when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his own right hand in the heavenly places. It just shows you right there. The resurrection power that raised Yeshua from the dead is the resurrection power that resides inside of us. Verse 21, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion and every name that is named, above every title that can be conferred, not only in this age and in this world, but also in the age and the world which are to come. And he has put all things under his feet and has appointed him the universal and supreme head of the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. For in that body lives the full measure of him who makes everything complete and who fills everything everywhere with himself. He who fills everything everywhere with himself has filled us with himself. And it's that resurrection power. The voice actually in that says, God of our Lord Yeshua the Anointed, Father of glory, I call out to you on behalf of your people. Give them minds ready to receive wisdom and revelation so they will truly know you. Open the eyes of their hearts and let the light of your truth flood in. Shine your light on the hope you are calling them to embrace. Reveal to them the glorious riches you are preparing as their inheritance. Let them see the full extent of your power that is at work in those of us who believe. And may it be done according to your might and power. Friends, in this same might and resurrection power that he used in the Anointed One to raise him from the dead and to position him at his right hand in heaven, there is nothing over him. He's above all rule, authority, power, and dominion, over every name invoked, over every title bestowed in this age and the next. Yahweh has placed all things beneath his feet and anointed him as the head over all things for his church. This church is his body, the fullness of the one who fills all in all. Philippians 3:10 says, I want to know Yeshua and the power of his resurrection. And Paul, with this word that we're talking about, this word power, Paul uses it. It's the Greek word for power is dunamis. I'm saying that right? Dunamis, which is the root of the word dynamite. So Paul is saying, Yahweh wants to give you dynamite power that can change your life. Think of it. That's what resurrection power is. If resurrection power raises the dead to life, it's dynamite power. Yes, the same power that raised Yeshua from the dead 2,000 years ago is available to us right now to transform the weaknesses into strengths. So what does the word resurrection mean? Resurrection is the act of bringing something that had disappeared or ended back into use or existence. It literally means to rise up or stand up. That's what it literally means. That same resurrection power is in us. That means that we can have the victory in every area of our lives, every situation, every circumstance that comes up. We can have that victory because of resurrection power if we grab a hold of it and realize that we have it and how to use it. We have to know how to use the resurrection power that is in us. It raises things back from the dead. Resurrection power is at work. It's in our body, in our finances, in our children. You know, your finances can be resurrected. Our bodies can be resurrected. Our marriages can be resurrected. You know, our children can be resurrected. And I'm not talking, literally dead, but they can be. This is all things. If the enemy has done things and your finances are looking the natural like they're, okay? Resurrection power can raise your finances back up. If a marriage in the natural looks, okay, resurrection power can raise that marriage back up and put it together like it never even happened. If the enemy has put something in someone's body and it looks like in the natural, well, nothing left that we can do, resurrection power is the answer. Resurrection power is what can raise back up. And resurrection power is what obliterates. It can obliterate any cancer cell. It can obliterate any diabetes. It can obliterate and completely annihilate anything that the enemy tries to put on us. It strengthens us to finish the race and not only be victorious in our lives, but to show others that that same power can help them be victorious in their life. Resurrection power. Now, interesting how I came across this. Nothing happens by incidents or by coincidence or accidents or whatever. And this just happened to come in something that somebody had handed me. And it was just with one line. I'd read the whole rest of it and stuff, and this was a couple weeks ago. And there was this one line in it, and it was like, oh my goodness, and it fit right in with this, because it talked about resurrection power that they wrote in this note that they gave me. And it says, resurrection power is the power to cancel our past. Okay? It's the power to cancel our past. No matter what's gone on in our past, no matter what mistakes, no matter what we've done, no matter whatever, all of us has pasts. But why is it called past? Because it's past. Okay? But resurrection power, people have a tendency to continue to live in their past and to bring their past into the present. But resurrection power has the power to cancel that. It has the power to cancel past, has the power to obliterate that once and for all. Think of Holy Spirit gave me this example. Think of an Etch-a-Sketch. All of us have played with those little Etch-a-Sketch things, and and you draw all the little pictures or whatever. Well, what do you do to get a clear screen? You take it and you shake it, and it's all erased, like it never even happened. It's all gone, all back to a clean slate to start over. And that's what resurrection power does.
When you think of resurrection, she said its ability to cancel our past. Well, the very act of resurrection turns back death. Just think in the natural. Think of I was going to say Jairus, not Jairus, but Jairus' daughter, Lazarus. He was in the grave for 3 days. When Yeshua came and spoke and called him forth, it turned death back. It's like it went back to before the death occurred and erased it. It's literally rewriting life into the story. And so when you're believing for resurrection of something in your life, you're believing for a rewriting of something that the enemy intersected you with, the curse that the enemy tried to intersect your life with, and it's reversing the curse. It's rewriting that. Think of, was it Hezekiah? King Hezekiah, who was told he was going to die, and he turned his face to the wall and prayed. And the Lord turned back the sundial as a representation that he was adding 15 years to his life. He turned back the curse of death upon his life. So when Yeshua comes with the power, the grave literally couldn't hold him. The grave could not hold him. Death itself was turned back because of the power of the Almighty that was inside of him. And so when that power is living inside of you, there is no death that can come against you. There is nothing that the enemy can send against you that can succeed, because the very resurrection power inside of you reverses it. It just can't. It's like one of those, like if you think of like a little floating ball that you put in a pool, you can push it down, but it's just going to keep popping back up. You cannot keep it down. It just keeps reversing the law of gravity, basically. So when that resurrection power is in you, it's reversing whatever the enemy is trying to hold you down with. It's turning it back.
The most important thing in life is knowing Yeshua and experience the power of his resurrection. So you combine the word resurrection, and then there's the word power. The word power literally means to be able. You are able to overcome, to win, to defeat sickness, lack. You are able to bring back to life something that was dead. Like I said at the beginning, finances, health, family. So when you combine power, literally means you're able to, with resurrection, the act of bringing something back that has disappeared or ended, you are able. That's what it's saying. Resurrection power is saying you are able. Not that you might be able today and might be able to do it tomorrow. No, you are able. You are able to bring something that has disappeared or ended back into existence. Think about I don't know why this example, I think I heard it the other day, maybe I am thinking of it, but normally wouldn't be my example, but think of like NFL, a football game. And you have like those 350-pound linemen, those huge guys, and they're, what's their purpose? They're huge, big guys with all power and authority then to take out the opponent, right? So you have this 350-pound lineman stand up, and then something happens, and the ref comes and blows the whistle. Well, you ever notice most of the refs, well, maybe not, because we really don't watch, some of us in here don't watch a lot of football, but, a lot of the refs are like 5'6", 5'7", 5'8". You got this 6'6" linebacker who's 350 pounds, and this little 5'6" ref with his little white and black shirt on, okay, and he blows his whistle. What does that lineman know? All it takes is that ref to blow the whistle, and the lineman instantly stops. Why? Because the lineman recognizes in the referee not only the power and authority that referee holds, but that referee has all of the NFL backing him up. So when the devil is coming at us and we stand up and we blow that whistle, it shows the devil that all of heaven is backing us up. Just like that referee with all of the NFL is backing him up, we have all of heaven backing us up. Because we have the power and the authority. What does it say? All power and authority to overcome all the works of the enemy. All the works of the enemy.
I don't know why this example popped into my mind too, but if you've ever played tug of war, you ever play tug of war when you're a child or even when you're an adult, play tug of war, and usually it's supposed to be a fair match. You're supposed to have someone of equal size across from you. But imagine that 350-pound linebacker, and I'm on the other side of the rope. In my own self, am I really going to be able to hold my end of the rope and stop him from just pulling me across like a feather? No. But what if I attached the other end of that rope to a horse's saddle or to a tank? Is that 350-pound linebacker any match for a tank or a 2,000-pound horse? No. So resurrection power is about who's backing you up. You and your own self in a wrestling match against the enemy would not be able to stand. But with all the power of heaven backing you up, with the same power that raised Yeshua himself from the dead backing you up, the enemy doesn't stand a chance.
You have to release it.
Yeah.
So say that was Jordan in a situation against that. Okay, you've got to release it by the words of your mouth. You've got to release it. Resurrection power is working in me now.
You have to activate it.
You have to activate it. And that's something that just weeks ago has just really come alive with me since Pesach about resurrection power. And I have made that, added it actually, I kind of had it before, but I have added certain things into my confessions with that whole thing. And every single morning, I decree it over me, I decree it over Australia, I decree it over Scott. It's like the Spirit of God is in me. And resurrection power is working in me now. The Spirit of God is in Azriela, and resurrection power is working in her now. The Spirit of God is in Scott, and resurrection power is working in him now. When you give word to it, that's where the power comes in. It's one thing you could sit there and think and be pulling, resurrection power is working in me now. Thinking it's not going to do it. It's the words that release, that activate all of heaven on your behalf, that activate the angels. That's a good example, because you release resurrection power is working in me now, and that person that you're pulling the rope against, I fully believe, because all of a sudden, see 20, 30 huge angels standing behind you, pulling on that string. Because resurrection power is working in us.
Well, think of a police officer. If he's trying to stop somebody, he doesn't think at them. He doesn't stand there and send his thoughts to them, stop, by the name of the law. Yeah. Mothers can send a look to the child, and the child knows exactly what it means, and they get in line. Yeah, but a police officer will usually use their words and call out "stop" in the name of the law, or whatever they say. They have to say it. They can't just think it toward that person. The third person is not reading their thoughts. It's not effective until they speak their authority. They have to speak their authority. And then if that person disobeys what they speak, they're in trouble with the law. Because it's not just that one police officer saying it. It's all of the authority of the police department and they're arresting power that's backing that person up. So by your word of authority, all of heaven is backing you up. Yahweh himself is backing you up. When you're speaking on his word, the enemy has to obey it. He has no choice but to obey it. Resist the devil and he will flee, but first you have to submit yourself to God. That's the greater power that's backing you up. That's the force that's backing you up. It's not I'm telling you to flee. It's not I'm telling you you need to stop. You in your own self don't have that. But with all of heaven backing you up and you're speaking according to his word, nothing can stand.
And you have Yeshua himself who's got your back covered.
Covenant.
You know, Scott showed me a picture last night, and it was a powerful picture of Yeshua holding a lamb. I don't know who sent it to him or how he got it or whatever, but he's holding a lamb like this, and he's hunched over, and there's wolves behind him, and he's holding the wolves back, but he's got the lamb.
Yeah.
He's got the back of you. You know, he's between you and the enemy. And it was such a powerful picture when he showed me that last night. And I was like, wow. But anyways, so Romans 8:11 says, and if the spirit of him who raised Yeshua from the dead dwells in you, he who raised up Yeshua the Messiah from the dead will also restore to life your mortal, short-lived, perishable bodies through his spirit who dwells in you. The voice of Romans 8:11 says, if the spirit of the one who resurrected Yeshua from the dead lives inside of you, then you can be sure that he who raised him will cast the light of life into your mortal bodies, will cast resurrection power into your mortal bodies through the life-giving power of the Spirit residing in you. That is what all of us have, is this resurrection power. You know, I thought of this the other night. It's like, you know, think of a power line. You know, we see all these power lines up all over the place. And power lines, just in the natural, they have up to 750,000, was it volts or amps, volts, of electricity surging through them. Now you think of that, you just go outside and you see this line, okay, it just looks like this line, but there's so much power wrapped up in that line, okay? So you have a storm that comes along or whatever, and there's, you know, trees take some lines down and you see downed lines. What do they usually tell you? Don't go near the down lines. Why? Because even when it's down, there's still power working in it. There's still power working in it, even when it's down. But then what happens? You have a lineman who comes along, and he resurrects that power line and puts it back up. So even in the source of that power line, even when it's down, resurrection power causes it to get back up, and it's back to full speed. It's back, like we've been saying, like it never even happened. You know, it didn't go from 750,000 volts down to 500,000. No, it went right back up with that 750,000 worth of volts, full strength. You know, Scott and I had an experience, not last week, it must have been the week before. And, you know, this happens occasionally, and it's like, oh, so I always put my angels in front of my windows and stuff. And we have one side of our house that's kind of similar to the back of the sanctuary, and it's all glass. You know, the whole bottom is all sliding doors, and the top are like 6 big windows, square and triangle. It's all glass. And at certain types of the year, you know, we'll have a bird fly into it, because our bird feeders are right outside of it. So not last week, but the week before, I was in the kitchen, and Scott was doing something, and, you know, here we hear smack, okay, smack, and another bird flew through into the windows. And so he was on his way outside this way, and I was on my way down. I went to the sliding door to open, because I always check to see, okay, there's the bird down there. And sure enough, he was laying on his back on top of the recycle bin, and his head was hanging off the edge of it. And it was like, okay. Now, you don't get moved by anything in the natural. Now, this might sound silly, but you got to start small. You practice on the little things, okay? You practice. Azrael and I do it all the time. You know, we find something that's dead, and it's like, okay. But I changed it a little bit recently because of this whole revelation of resurrection power. So he had gone outside one way and was doing something. I went down in the cellar, Opened the cellar door, and there he is, his head hanging off the side of the recycle bin. And so I picked him up and righted him back up, but instantly started speaking resurrection power into that bird. And instantly, and I had my hand on him and was petting his head and saying that the resurrection power that resides in me is flowing out of me right now into your body. And this resurrection power, I call on it, and I call on you to rise up. And kept doing it. Now, did anything at first look like it changed in the natural? No. But that's why we don't get moved by what we see. Because the moment you get moved by what you see, you've lost the battle. You've lost the battle right there. That's why we walk by faith and not by sight. So then he came along and he was decreeing over the bird and saying things and stuff. And I just kept, resurrection power resides in you. Resurrection power, you rise up right now in Yeshua's name. And I was speaking life back into his body and commanding, cells and organs to get back in line and everything like that. And so he actually had to get going to leave for work. So I was like, okay, so he left for work, and I was like, okay, and you either know it works or you don't, okay? And we've been so well trained in this congregation that we know it works. And when we release the words, it's a done deal. So I spoke a couple more things over him, and I was like, I know it's a done deal. I know it's a done deal. And I had a child that was getting up and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, I need to go and tend to her. But I know. But I didn't stop decreeing. Just because I wasn't standing there with that bird, there's no time or distance in the spirit. So I was upstairs, and I was still decreeing, resurrection power is working in that bird right now. And I call it forth out of him. I command it to rise up out of him. And every once in a while, I went back and looked at him, and he at one point I noticed he kept slouching over. And I was like, no, you don't. And I started rebuking the spirit of death. I'm like, death, I rebuke you, and I command you to go. No, you don't, not on my watch. And I went back downstairs, and I started petting him. And as soon as I started petting him, he popped his head back up, and he opened his eyes. If I turned to walk away, he'd start to go. And and I went right back. I was like, no, you don't. You rise back up. And I did this after I said to her, I'm like, you guys sit on the couch and just stay here. Don't move. Here's your carrot juice. Don't move. Mommy's busy. And so I went back down there, and I was like, no, not on my watch. Not on my watch. Not on my property. And his little head would do. And now I knew Scott had been speaking things over him too. And there's power in agreement. Power and agreement. And so I went back upstairs, and I got breakfast done and stuff, and I went over and I opened the screen door, and I looked at him, and when I looked down, he looked up at me, and I was like, you're good, dude, you're good. And 5 minutes later, whoop, there he went. He flew off. And that's the power of resurrection power. That is the power of resurrection power. And and if it will work for a bird, okay, it will work for anything in any situation that we may have Yahweh has us in. But we have got to know who we are and how to operate it and whose we are. And like I said, I added it to this recently for us, and it's decree and declare every morning. Resurrection power is working in me now in the name of Yeshua. The Spirit of God is in me. The Spirit of God is that same power. As He is, so are we. And we were made in His image and His likeness. And He even says, greater works than I do, you will do. You will do the same works as me, but greater. Now catch that. If He had just said, you'll do the same works as me, hallelujah, we're all set, okay? He healed the blind and healed the lame and healed the sick. If He just said, you'll do the same work, but He said, you'll do the same work as me and greater and greater. So that's who we are, and that's what resurrection power is. And we have got to tap into that. That is the right way to live. That is the right way to live. And there is a right way to die, okay? There's a right way to live, and there's a right way to die. So, speaking, I wasn't even thinking this, but, using Rick Renner at the beginning when he was saying about how he chooses his leadership, this is actually a letter, devotion from Rick Renner that's called The Right Way to Die. There's a right way to die, and there's a wrong way to die. And I believe Jordan touched on it, or recently we did. There's a right way to die and there's a wrong way to die. And, the wrong way to die is cutting out early, okay? Cutting out before your time of either 120 years or when Yeshua comes. But there's a right way to die. And 2 Timothy 4:7 says, I have fought the good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. When I was just old enough to get a job, I heard about a job opening at the huge cemetery just down the street from where my family lived. The old caretaker needed someone to mow the cemetery lawn. So one day I walked down to the cemetery and knocked on the door at the caretaker's residence. When he came to the door, I said, Sir, I understand there's a job opening here. I've come to apply for that position. I kind of thought, oh, how fun would that be? Because you'd be commanding these bodies to rise up, be practicing resurrection power to rise up. The city all of a sudden might be when they see all these bodies start coming up onto the ground. Whoa, okay, So he said, Sir, I understand there's a job opening here. I've come to apply for that position. The old man who had been the caretaker for more than 40 years looked me over and asked me a few questions. Then he told me to report to work on the following Monday. That following Monday, I started my short career at the local graveyard, my first real job. Every day after school, I quickly dashed down the hallway to put my books in my locker and then rushed across town to the cemetery, pulled out my lawnmower, and went to the next section of the cemetery that needed to be mowed. 5 days a week, I lived and worked among the dead. Each day, I mowed and edged the weeds around new graves, old graves, mausoleums? How do you say that? Mausoleums? In one section of the cemetery that was so old, no one could decipher the inscriptions on the limestone markers any longer. When it was time to bury someone, I helped dig the grave, lower the casket, and fill the grave with dirt. I did honestly think, this is morbid, I wouldn't want that kind of job, but... Yeah.
What was your first job?
Yeah,
I worked at a cemetery.
Okay, I dug the holes. When it was time to bury someone, I helped dig the grave, lower the casket, and fill the grave with dirt. When the flowers wilted that loved ones had placed on the graves, I was the one who gathered up the dead flowers and took them to the garbage. I helped put up the tent that loved ones stood under during gravesite rites, and then I helped take it down. Working in a graveyard had a very strong effect on my life in those formative years. I'm sure it did. God used that time in the graveyard to make me think about the seriousness and temporal nature of life in general, as well as what I was going to do with my own life. Now think about at the beginning of this, when I started with that. Consider your life. Consider your life. As I walked between the tombstones, I looked at them and asked myself, who were these people? What did they do with their lives? Did they contribute anything to the world, or did they just live, die, and then disappear into these graves? Every day I thought about these questions. It made me determine that I would not pass from this earth without doing something significant for God with my life. I resolved that when I died, no one would have to ask, gee, I wonder who he was and what he did with his life. To me, it was totally unacceptable that I would end up like so many others had, as just another name on another tombstone. People don't like to think about dying, yet death is a reality each of us ultimately has to face. We may hope and wait for Yeshua's return in our lifetime, but if he doesn't come before we die, then a day will come in all our futures when we'll be laid in a coffin. Family and friends will come to our funeral services. The casket lid will be closed for the last time. Oh, this is actually not... And we'll be lowered into a grave that will then get packed with dirt. Later, our graves will have grass growing on top of them.
Or they just fry you.
Later, what I'm reading is much more pleasant. Later, our graves will have grass growing on top of them, and a young boy will push the lawnmower over them as part of his job, just as I did years ago. Like it or not, there is a funeral in all of our futures, unless Yeshua comes while we are still alive. The thought may sound morbid, but if you live with this unavoidable fact before you at all times, it will help you to live a more balanced and committed life. Why is that? Because when you live thinking only of today, everything seems monumental. Yet the truth is, most of the things that steal our shalom, hinder us from doing what Yahweh wants us to do, disrupt our joy, and hurt our relationships, won't matter anymore when we die and stand before Yeshua. The only thing that will matter then is what Yeshua will say to us when we stand before him and look into his eyes. The Apostle Paul told us, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of the Messiah, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he has done, whether it be good or bad." Because Paul lived with the awareness of that moment when he would stand before Yeshua, he was able to keep pushing ahead even when times became exceedingly difficult. He knew that eventually life would pass and the difficult trials would end, and he would stand before Yeshua to give account for his life. This is why Paul wrote, "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, works for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory." I love this verse because it sheds light on Paul's attitude towards life and afflictions. He didn't like afflictions and he stood against them, but he refused to over-magnify them, choosing instead to view them as light afflictions. That's kind of a whole other sermon, okay? But catch that. He chose not to over-magnify them. Would you call Paul's challenges light afflictions? He faced rejection from some of his closest friends, and even worse, by many of the churches in Asia. He had been severely beaten several times. He had been shipwrecked 3 times. He had lived through perils in the city, in the wilderness, and at sea. He had been in peril of robbers, of heathens, and of false brethren, and had endured periods of hunger, thirst, and sleeplessness. These were monumental challenges, yet Paul refused to let them be monumental in his life. Instead, he deemed them small stuff, mere distractions compared to the eternal glory that awaited him. What enabled Paul to press ahead when he was being assaulted so viciously? How could he maintain such a victorious attitude? How is it that he never surrendered to weariness, exhaustion, or to the devil's attacks? These questions can all be answered by the foremost desire of Paul's heart, that he would one day hear Yeshua say to him, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Paul's driving motivation was his anticipation to hear Yeshua say those words and to know that he had finished his race well. This is why Paul said, "But none of these things move me, neither count I my life dear unto me, so that I might finish my course with joy." At the end of his life, he wrote to Timothy and triumphantly declared, "I have fought a good fight." The words fought and fight are from the Greek word agonizo. This word means a struggle, a fight, a combat, or a fierce competition, and is where we get the word agony. By using this word, Paul tells us that some of this ministry has been a real struggle, difficult, fierce, and agonizing. Yet Paul never budged an inch. He stayed in the fight and was faithful to his call. This verse could literally be translated, "A good fight, that's what I fought." That proclamation has the sense of victory and exhilaration. These are the sentiments of a man who has no regrets. He is proud of the contest in which he has been engaged. Regardless of all the others who have dropped out of the fight, Paul can say, "I stayed in there. A good fight that's what I fought." Then Paul goes on to tell us, "I have finished my course." This word course is the Greek word dromos, which always describes a foot race or a running track. Also notice that he referred to his life assignment as my course. Paul knew precisely what race he was called to run, and he didn't attempt to run anyone else's course. In spite of all the things that tried to slow him down, knock him out of the race, and defeat him, he refused to quit running. No matter what happened, Paul just stayed right on track, true to the course Yahweh had given him. Thus, this part of the verse could be translated, "My race, I ran it with all my might, never stopping until I knew I had reached the goal and finished it." Lastly, Paul writes, "I have kept the faith." The Greek word for kept is the word tiero. It is the same Greek word used to depict a watch of soldiers who are positioned to protect something important. The job of these soldiers was to stand guard and to keep watch. They were to be faithful and remain committed to their charge of keeping watch regardless of the kind of assault or the number of attackers they might encounter. This is the word Paul uses when he says, "I have kept the faith." Even though he encountered difficulties and challenges, he never left his post or surrendered to the assaults and attacks that came against him. Through it all, Paul kept watch over the mission and the message Yahweh gave him. When you put all this together, 2 Timothy 4:7 could be understood to say this. A good fight, that's what I fought. My race, I ran it with all my might, never stopping until I knew I had reached the goal and finished it. The faith, I protected it, guarded it, and watched over it with all my heart and strength. In spite of the assaults and attacks, I stayed true to my assignment. This soldier of the Lord has everything to shout about. His ministry may have been difficult, but he made it. Paul never gave an inch to the enemy. Now he faces his own death. He isn't fearful. Rather, he rejoices because he knows he has done well. He's ready to depart this earth and to be forever with his Lord. Looking toward that moment when he will finally stand before Yeshua. Paul confidently writes, henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me that day, and not to me only, but to all them also that love his appearing. When you are tempted to be sidetracked and distracted by the challenges of life, try to find a few minutes to be alone with the Lord. I wouldn't say try to, I would say do it. Do it. Find a few minutes to be alone with the Lord. Remind yourself that all your challenges are fleeting and that they will soon pass. But your obedience to Yahweh is eternal. So there is nothing more important than doing what Yahweh has told you to do. When you stand before Yeshua, all the challenges you faced will be forgotten, and just one question will remain. Yeshua will want to know, did you do what I asked you to do, or did you get distracted and let the cares of life stop you from fulfilling your assignment? It will help you live a more balanced and committed life if you will keep everything that happens to you in perspective of that day when you stand before Yeshua. Don't you want to look into his face with confidence? Of course you do. So take the attitude of the Apostle Paul. Decide to deliberately view your challenges as nothing but light affliction that won't last too long. On the other hand, what you do with Yahweh's call in your life will last forever. So don't let these measly little challenges prevent you from pushing onward toward the high calling of Yahweh. Just as the Apostle Paul finished his race with joy, you can finish your course with joy and victory as well. Determine today that you will be a soldier of the Lord who can look back one day and be proud of the fight you fought, the race you ran, and the faith you kept. A soldier with no regrets. So there's a right way to live and a right way to die. And everything that we're saying right now depicts what those right ways are.
And it's all about finishing the race, like we talked about last week. Our number one goal in life should be finishing the race. Let's turn over to Philippians chapter 3 real quick. I think we keep circling back around to Philippians chapter 3 because it was the Apostle Paul's heartbeat, I think, in life. And it should be ours too. What is our heartbeat in life? And so let's start at we'll start at verse 1 because he's giving some background to it. For the rest, my brethren, delight yourselves in the Lord and continue to rejoice that you are in him. See, there's that whole idea of being in him, in the power of his resurrection. To keep writing to you over and over the same things is not irksome to me and is a precaution for your safety. Look out for those dogs. Look out for those mischief makers. Look out for those who mutilate the flesh. For we are the true circumcision who worship God in spirit and by the Spirit of God and exalt in glory and pride ourselves in Yeshua the Messiah and put no confidence or dependence in the flesh and on outward privileges and physical advantages and external appearances. Though for myself, I have at least the grounds to rely on the flesh. If any other man considers that he has or seems to have reason to rely on the flesh and his physical and outward advantages, I have still more. Circumcised when I was 8 days old, of the race of Israel and of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew, and the son of Hebrews. As to the observance of the law, I was of the party of the Pharisees. As to my zeal, I was a persecutor of the church, and by the law's standard of righteousness, supposed justice, uprightness, and right standing with God, I was proven to be blameless, and no fault was found within me. So Paul's saying, if you think you have a reason to stand on your accomplishments in the flesh, I think I got you past. I think I can surpass that. But, verse 7, whatever former things I had that might have been gained to me, I have come to consider as one combined loss for the Messiah's sake. Yes, furthermore, I count everything as loss compared to the possession of the priceless privilege, the overwhelming preciousness, the surpassing worth, and the supreme advantage of knowing the Messiah, Yeshua, my Lord, and of progressively becoming more deeply and intimately acquainted with him, of perceiving and recognizing and understanding him more fully and clearly. For his sake, I have lost everything and consider it all to be mere rubbish, refuse, in order that I may win and gain the Anointed One, and that I may actually be found and known as in him, not having any self-achieved righteousness that can be called my own, based on my obedience to the law's demands, but possessing that genuine righteousness which comes through faith in the Messiah, the Anointed One, the truly right standing with God, which comes from God by saving faith. For my determined purpose is that I may know him, that I may progressively become more deeply and intimately acquainted with him, perceiving and recognizing and understanding the wonders of his person more strongly and more clearly, and that I may in the same way come to know the power outflowing from his resurrection. See, so he wants to come to know him and the power of his resurrection, which it exerts over believers, and that I may so share in his sufferings as to be continually transformed in spirit into his likeness, even to his death, in the hope that, if possible, I may attain to the spiritual and moral resurrection that lifts me out from among the dead, even while in the body. So the resurrection that is flowing through Paul, he's saying, I want to attain to that, even while I'm in my body. I want to attain to that. And he says, that he may be transformed to his death. Well, transformed is putting to death your flesh, putting to death the things of your lower nature, so that you can be resurrected to who you really are. Not that I have now attained this idea or have already been made perfect, but I press on to lay hold of, grasp, and make my own that for which the Messiah Yeshua has laid hold of me and made me his own. I do not consider, brethren, that I have captured and made it my own yet, but one thing I do is my one aspiration, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. Or another translation says, pressing forward. I press on toward the goal to win the supreme and heavenly prize to which God in the Messiah Yeshua is calling us upward. So Paul's one goal in life was to press on toward the goal, to press on toward the mark, to keep moving forward. That needs to be our goal in life too. You keep moving forward. What if the devil throws something in your way? You keep moving forward. What if this seems to happen? What if the trail falls out in front of you? You keep moving forward. I think it was it Martin Luther King that said, if you can't walk, then crawl. If you can't crawl, do whatever you need to do to move forward. Don't just stand there. Move forward. If you don't know the direction that Yahweh has for your life yet, move forward. Just take the next step. It's a lot easier to steer a moving car than a parked car. You ever try sitting in one place in the parking lot and try to steer the car? You can't do it. You got to be having some motion. That's the principle of physics. You got to be, a body in motion is a lot easier to move than something that's stationary. What is one of the biggest things that doctors will tell people, or medical science tells people, that is necessary for your health? Exercise. If somebody, you see this on TV, the 1,000-pound people and all that, they never move. They're sick. Their bodies are falling apart because they're not exercising. They're not moving. You need exercise to have good health. Well, to have good spiritual health, you need to be moving. You need to be exercising. You need to keep moving forward. Momentum is paramount, because what does movement show? Movement shows that there's life. If you, like she's saying with the bird, if you see something that's just like laying there like that, upside down usually, what does that mean? There's no natural life in that thing. If there's life in it, it's going to be moving. It's going to be breathing. We want to be moving. We want to be breathing. We have that resurrection power inside of us for a reason. But we got to press on. You know, it's interesting because we just this week crossed over into the month of ER or IR, depending on how you pronounce it. And it's the month that's a month of transition. It's a month that they call the bridge month. It bridges between Passover and Shavuot, Nisan and Sivan. And so a lot of people think, oh, it's not a significant month. It's a bridge. Well, if there's no bridge, how are you going to get across that? You know, you think of where's that? I think of when we went up to Prince Edward Island, and there's mainland of Canada, and then you go over to Prince Edward Island, and there's a bridge that connects the two of them, and it's a long bridge. It's several miles long, I believe. So there, you get to this point in the middle of the bridge where you can't see either shore. It's kind of a weird feeling because it's like you're on a boat, but you're in the middle of this highway that goes across the water. But thank God for that bridge, because otherwise you can't drive. You can't drive to Prince Edward Island. You'd have to take a ferry or whatever. So a bridge connects two places that are otherwise impassable. So you can't I was going to say transgress. That's not the word I'm looking for. What is the word I'm looking for? Can't go across. You can't traverse. Thank you. You can't traverse that gap. You can't traverse that chasm between the two if you don't have a bridge. So ER is the bridge between Passover and Shavuot. It's called the month of radiance, which is another interesting thing because it's when the trees are bright with blossoms. They consider it to be a time of brightness, of joy, and of brilliance. ER is related to the Hebrew word for light, which is or. It's related to that. And it was the month in which the manna began falling for the children of Israel in the wilderness. So it's a month of Yahweh's provision. And it was given to them with divine radiance. Let's turn over to one last passage in Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah chapter 60, starting at verse 1. Arise from the depression and prostration in which circumstances have kept you. Rise to a new life. Shine. Be radiant with the glory of the Lord, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and dense darkness all peoples. Is that what's happening today? Sounds like today. But the Lord shall arise upon you, and his glory shall be seen on you. And nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Lift up your eyes round about you and see. They all gather themselves together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be carried and nursed in the arms. Then you shall see and be radiant, and your heart shall thrill and tremble with joy at the glorious deliverance and be enlarged. So take that for this month, the month of ER, the month of radiance. It's not dependent on what's going on in the circumstances out in the world. It's not dependent upon the darkness that's covering the earth. It's in the midst of the darkness that's covering the earth that the radiance shines, that arise, shine, your light has come. You got to be holding on to that and believing in it for it to come. You don't look at the darkness, any more than Yahweh looked at the darkness and said, oh, it's dark out there. No, what did he do in response to the darkness? Light be, and light was. In the midst of the darkness of the world, in the midst of the depression of circumstances around, you arise and you shine, for your light has come. What is that light? It's the resurrection power. The same power that raised Yeshua from the dead dwells inside of you. That you have that same light. You have that same power. And as we walk through ER, talking about taking account of our life and finishing our race, we got to tap into that resurrection power on a greater level. Pastor George talking about the strength that we need for the battle. There's battles that you can be in your life, or things that you can face in your life that try to sap your strength, that try to pull you downward. And there's spirits that are involved. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood, and it's not just the natural situation and circumstance. There's a spirit that is trying to pull you down. Like you said, the depression and prostration in which circumstances have kept you. It's trying to pull you down, trying to weigh you down. But just like that ball that I was talking about, that you try to hold it down, but as soon as you let go of it, it pops back up to the surface. We're supposed to be like that. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. We're supposed to be that. No matter what the enemy tries to push us down, we pop right back up because that resurrection power resides inside of us. It's not something that we have to put on. It's inside of us. We have to let it out. He lives inside of us. And so any situation, any circumstance in our life that seems like death is in it, the resurrection power is in us. And we are to speak life to the dead things. Call those things that be not as though they are. If you just go out and say, well, I'm sick, or, well, my finances aren't where they need to be, that's where it's going to stay, because you're aligning your words with that. If you start speaking life to it, and that the same thing goes for your destiny. Well, I've always missed God, or, well, I'm a failure. Well, I made this mistake, so God could never use me. No, start aligning your words with what Yahweh's called you to do. And like I said last week, even start speaking what Paul said. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my race. I have kept the faith. You start speaking that out now, that's setting your course for the rest of your race. That's setting the course to the goal to finish your race. Another interesting thing in this month is that in the month of ER is the second Passover. And we know about the second Passover, that's when those who missed out on the first Passover, now you have a second chance. So this is the month of second chances. This is the month of restoration. It's a month where Yahweh is giving you an opportunity to start again. That resurrection power is turning back death. Whatever mistakes you may have made, they're in the past, like Sherry said. They're in the past. They're not in your present. You now have an opportunity to begin again. You have an opportunity to speak the life and to redefine your past. So it might be a fact that something was in your past, but now that you have repented, now that you're moving forward, now that becomes a stepping stone for you to go up to another level. You use the challenges, use the mistakes, use what happened in your past as a stepping stone to move forward. That I'm never going to miss it like that again in the past. IR is the month of healing as well. This is the month in which he said, I am the Lord your healer, and that's the acronym for the month. Ani Yahweh Rofecha, I am the Lord who heals you. So there is healing and there's restoration in this month. That same power that raised Yeshua from the dead. This is the month when Yeshua was walking around on the earth amongst his disciples. Teaching them what? Teaching them about the kingdom of God. That resurrection power that he had inside of him, he was now imparting to everyone around him. And so, Yahweh, he said, he is the Lord your healer. Take a hold of that. Dad used to talk about this, that it's going to come a time when we can't be relying on the medical science. We can't be relying on doctors. There's a reason why it's called practice. They don't know everything. They are not God. Now, there are doctors and there are scientists, and there's people who have been given the understanding and revelation that Yahweh has to be able to figure some things out. But regardless, we got to be looking to him. He's the one who gives us the power of resurrection. And so as we're walking in this month, we take a hold of that healing power, that resurrection power, whatever you need healing of in your life. That's not just physical healing. Take a hold of that. It's a month of the tribe of Issachar. And, we're a camp who knows about the tribe of Issachar. The tribe that has the understanding of the times and knows what to do about it. There's a lot of people who know what time they're living in, but they don't know what to do about it. There's a lot of people even out in the world who have at least the sanity and the common sense to say, this is crazy. What's going on is crazy, but they don't know what to do about it. We're supposed to be walking in such a place where we know what to do about it. We know the answer. You know, in the New Testament, it talks about how we're to know how to answer anyone who puts a question to us. Not by us studying up on it, but Holy Spirit lives inside of us. He is the answer giver. So it's time for us to advance forward, to press forward with that Issachar anointing, with the anointing to know what to do in this time. And so as we're walking through this month of ER, and you know what? Before we know it, we're going to blink and it's going to be Sivan. We have this small section of time to make the changes that we need to, because what's coming? Shavuot, the revelation at Sinai. We got to be already walking in that power, that resurrection power, so that when the revelation comes, it's like the two-part recipe that is going to create that dynamite effect. That it's just to ignite something inside of us that's not going to just stay. You know, if a stick of dynamite goes off in this building and it's powerful enough, it's not going to just stay within this building. It's got to go somewhere. That power has got to go somewhere. Think of like a nuclear weapon, where it's like that power can't be contained. It's just going to go out there. The power, the resurrection power that is within us is not supposed to just be contained to us and resurrect us. It's supposed to spread to those out there. That's our whole mission in life, is to be affecting the people around us. Think of it. When Yeshua raised from the dead, was it that power that was released when he raised from the dead? Was it restricted only to him? No, there were many others who came up out of their graves when he came up out of his grave. The power was so strong. And we're walking in a day and age where we're going to start seeing those signs and wonders. You know, think of the song that we sung it a while ago, that Too Good to Not Believe. You know, when I've seen cancer disappear and I've seen metal plates dissolve. And I know that there can be a tendency when we are singing that song to think, well, I've never seen that. Well, if you're speaking, well, I've never seen that, you're setting yourself up for in the future, then you're never going to see that. Why not start speaking, I've seen this? You declare and decree it as if it's now. Faith is now. Faith is not in the future. It's not, I'm going to see. I see it now. And as you start decreeing it, as you start declaring it, you're going to start seeing those things come to pass in your life. And again, it's not a selfish thing. It's not just for us. It's to be able to spread to others. Such as we have, we're supposed to give unto others. But if we don't even have it, if we're not even walking in the resurrection power ourselves, how are we supposed to give it to others? That's what our race is about. You know, in order to finish our race well, we need to finish it in such a way that we're impacting people around us. That we're not just running our own private little race of faith. And yes, you know, Jesus is going to meet me at the end, and I'm so happy to be with him. But how many people have our lives impacted? Some that we may not even know until we cross over. But we want to be the biggest impact on people for him as possible, so that we can hear him in the end say, well done, good and faithful servant. That we get to the point where our lives are such a reflection that we can't help it. It just overflows. You know, she talked about living in the overflow. We're supposed to be overflowing with the life of God, so that nothing of darkness, nothing of the curse, nothing of the enemy can live in our presence. That when we walk down the street, just like with Peter, that our very shadow, the very shadow of the presence of God that falls off of us, that people in that shadow are instantly healed. Their lives are instantly changed. They instantly have a revelation. Think of that whenever you're walking around. There's people who need an answer from God. There's people who might be asking for that revelation, and just your presence can release that in their life. So take a hold of that this month. Take a hold of that as we move forward and make a determination that, number one, you're not going to leave your race early. Amen. We've had too many that have done that. We don't need any more. You're not going to leave your race early, and you're going to finish your whole race, and you're going to finish it well for his glory. Not for yourself, but for his glory. Amen. Well, thank you for those of you who joined us today on Facebook. We trust you've gotten something out of this message. There will not be Bible study on Tuesday night, but we will see you next Sabbath at 11 a.m. Have a blessed week.